Episode 1. The Map That Lied. They told me the village never existed, that it was nothing more than a rumor whispered in the corners of taverns, an echo passed down by drunken old men who had nothing left but fading memories. But I've held the proof in my hands, proof that shouldn't exist. It began with a map. I found it in the dusty archives of the regional library, tucked inside a leather-bound atlas that hadn't been touched in decades. My fingertips brushed across its brittle pages until my eyes caught something strange, an ink blot of a place marked San Lazaro. A neat circle, tiny houses drawn in miniature lines, a church spire, even the symbol of a well in the center, a village, clear as daylight. But when I compared it to every modern map, San Lazaro was gone, not renamed, not abandoned, gone, as if it had been erased from memory itself. At first, I thought it was a cartographer's mistake, one of those forgotten settlements swallowed by history, until I showed the map to a local historian. His face drained of color. He muttered under his breath, almost as if afraid the paper could hear him. That place, it was wiped away. One night, it simply wasn't there anymore. The words should have sounded absurd. Instead, they felt heavier than stone. I drove to the location, guided only by the coordinates on the old map. What should have been a cobblestone square was nothing but an open field. Not a ruin, not a charred skeleton of houses, just grass, stretching endlessly, like a wound covered in green. No trace of a well. No foundation stones, no broken cross from a forgotten chapel. Yet the air felt wrong, still, expectant, like the land itself was holding its breath. I walked the length of where the village should have been, my boots sinking slightly into the soil. And then I saw it. A single stone lying half-buried, its surface scratched with something I recognized instantly. A carving of a bell. I bent down, touched the carving, and felt the chill spread up my arm. The field around me seemed to shiver. And then, faint and distant, carried by no wind at all, I heard it. The sound of a church bell. 1 strike. 2 strikes. 3. When I spun around, there was nothing, just empty grass. But I knew in that moment San Lazaro had not disappeared. No, it was hiding, waiting. And the map in my hand was not a mistake. It was an invitation. Episode 2. The Old Woman's Warning. The bell's echo followed me long after I left that empty field. It clung to me on the drive back, each toll replaying in my skull like a warning I couldn't ignore. But it wasn't until I met her that I realized the warning had been meant for me all along. She was waiting in the cafe by the roadside, a hunched figure draped in shawls that looked older than the building itself. I hadn't planned on speaking to her, but the moment I stepped in, her eyes found mine with an unsettling precision, as though she had been expecting me. "You've been to San Lazaro," she whispered before I even ordered a coffee. The name froze in my throat. Hardly anyone dared to say it aloud, as if speaking it summoned something best left buried. I slid into the chair opposite her, and for the first time I saw the deep scars running across her forearms, like burns that had never healed. "They told me it never existed," I said carefully. She shook her head, her voice hoarse but steady. "It existed. It thrived, until the night the earth took it back." Her words stirred a chill that no warm drink could melt. She leaned closer, lowering her voice until it was almost a hiss. "The night it vanished, the villagers gathered in the square. They said the priest had heard a second voice in the confessional. Not human, not divine, something in between. That night, the church bells rang, but no one was in the tower. The ground opened like a mouth, and by dawn..." She paused, trembling, her nails digging into the wooden table. "By dawn, only I remained." I swallowed hard, searching her face for some trace of exaggeration, but there was none. Her eyes were soaked in terror, the kind of terror that doesn't fade with time. "Why you?" I asked. The old woman's lips quivered. "Because I didn't pray." Her words struck me harder than any bell could. She reached out suddenly, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. The scars on her arm brushed my skin. "Leave it alone," she begged. "Forget San Lazaro. Forget the map. If you keep digging, it will take you too. The bells don't stop once they've chosen their listener." Before I could answer, she rose and shuffled out, leaving behind a faint scent of smoke and something metallic. Blood. Maybe. I sat frozen, her warning rattling in my skull. But as much as I wanted to believe her, as much as I wanted to walk away, I knew I wouldn't. Because while she spoke, I had heard it again. the faint toll of a bell 3 times from somewhere deep beneath the floor. Episode 3: The Abandoned Church. I returned to the field the next morning. Against every warning the old woman had breathed into my ear, something inside me refused to let go. Curiosity, obsession, call it what you want. But as the fog curled low over the grass, I realized I wasn't just chasing a story anymore. I was being pulled. That's when I saw it. Amid the emptiness, one building remained. The church. It stood crooked, half swallowed by weeds, its steeple leaning like a finger pointing toward heaven in defiance. The wood of its doors was warped, the paint stripped bare by rain and time, but it was there, solid, impossible, as if the earth had spared it deliberately. My pulse quickened as I stepped closer. The iron handles burned cold in my palm, colder than the air itself. The hinges groaned when I pushed, the sound echoing into the silence like a scream. Inside, the air was thick, stale, suffocating, as though prayers had rotted here. Pews lay splintered, gnawed by termites. Stained glass windows were cracked, but still clung stubbornly to fragments of saints whose faces had been twisted by the fractures. And at the far end stood the altar. I froze. The altar was clawed. Deep gouges raked across its stone surface as though something had tried to climb out of it, or into it. Lying open on top was a Bible, but the pages were torn, some missing, others drenched in a blackened stain that looked too much like blood. The passage that remained was underlined, the ink smudged but legible, and whosoever's name was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. I didn't want to believe it, but the implication was clear. San Lazaro had been erased, not just from maps, but from memory, from the book itself. My hands trembled as I turned to leave, but movement caught my eye. The mirror. Hanging crooked on the side wall, it was coated with grime, yet it reflected something the church no longer had. Rows of candles lit and flickering, illuminating a congregation of people kneeling in prayer. I spun around. The pews were empty, silent, but when I turned back to the glass, the figures remained. They were staring straight at me. And then, as if on cue, the bell tolled again. 1, 2, 3. This time the sound didn't come from the distance. It came from inside the church. Episode 4: The Silent Graves. The bell faded into silence, but its echo lingered in my bones long after I stumbled out of the church. I needed air. I needed proof I hadn't imagined it all. And that's when I saw the path. Narrow, overgrown, winding through the tall grass. My instincts told me it was no ordinary trail. It led somewhere. I followed. The fog thickened as I walked, swallowing sound, muting even the crunch of dirt beneath my boots. Then the earth shifted under my feet. Not flat grass anymore, stone. And as the mist parted, I realized where I had wandered. The cemetery. It was the only other thing that remained of San Lazaro. A field of gravestones, rows upon rows, leaning like broken teeth against the sky. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Every headstone was blank, smooth, as though the names had been scraped off by an unseen hand. No dates, no epitaphs, no memory of who had once rested beneath the soil. Kneeling, I brushed my fingers over the nearest stone. Cold, polished, empty. I pressed harder, desperate to feel some engraving, any mark at all. But there was nothing, just the silence of the forgotten. Then the ground trembled. At first I thought it was my imagination, but the tremor grew, subtle at first, then undeniable. A shiver racing through the dirt, pulsing beneath my knees. And with it came a sound. Not a bell this time, but something softer. A scratching. From below, I staggered back as the soil shifted, as if something was clawing upward from its grave. My breath came in gasps, each one visible in the freezing air, though the night was not that cold. I strained to listen, and the scratching sharpened, multiplied, spreading across the cemetery like a ripple. Dozens of graves, maybe hundreds. I forced myself to move, stumbling between headstones, scanning for an exit. That's when I saw it. One stone that wasn't blank. One stone that had resisted the erasure. Carved into its face, crude and shallow, was a single word. Listen. Before I could comprehend it, the tremors stopped. The soil stilled. The scratching ceased. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. And then, from the heart of the cemetery, a voice, childlike, hollow, rose with the mist. Do you hear it too? Episode 5: The missing priest. The child's voice dissolved into mist, leaving my pulse hammering in my throat. I fled the cemetery, stumbling through grass and shadow until I collapsed against the hood of my car. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night I couldn't sleep. The graves, the scratching, the single word carved into stone, "Listen," it all circled me like vultures. But fear only sharpened my resolve. I had to know who had led this village, who had rung those cursed bells. If anyone held the key, it was the priest. I dug into parish records the next morning. Faded ink, brittle paper, archives locked away in the diocesan office. I wasn't supposed to be there, but obsession makes thieves of us all. I combed through baptismal certificates, burial registers, marriage licenses. The name surfaced again and again, signed with a steady hand. Father Mateo, the priest of San Lazaro for 34 years. And then, nothing. No transfer order, no obituary, no record of death. As if he, like his flock, had been swallowed whole. But there was more. Hidden between the pages of a ledger, I found it. A leather-bound journal, edges burned, pages warped by water. Father Mateo's handwriting filled every line, his words carved in desperation. I turned to the last entry, my stomach tightened. The voice came again tonight, inside the confessional. Not a sinner, not a man. It knew my name. It spoke in echoes, as though the earth itself was answering me. I begged God to silence it. Instead, the bells tolled. I did not ring them. They tolled for us, for me. I fear the prayers no longer ascend. I fear they are being sent back. The ink smeared after that, as if his hand had been dragged across the page mid-sentence. I closed the book, my chest heavy. The old woman's words returned to me. The priest heard a second voice in the confessional. Was this the proof? That Father Mateo had bargained or blasphemed or simply lost his faith? I slipped the journal into my bag and left the archives. But as I crossed the threshold, I heard it again. The bell. 1, 2, 3. And this time it was closer. So close it rattled the windows. I looked around in panic. The office was empty. But then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed the crucifix on the wall. The figure of Christ carved into the wood had no mouth. Episode 6, The Disappearing Footprints. I left the diocesan office with Father Mateo's journal clutched to my chest, my heart still rattling from the sight of that crucifix with no mouth. The bells tolling had followed me into the night like a shadow I couldn't shake. But fear has a strange way of binding you to obsession. The more I trembled, the deeper I sank. That was when I met Elias. He was a young guide, a local who knew the forests and fields better than anyone. I told him only half the truth, that I was researching forgotten villages, abandoned places. He smirked, unimpressed. But when I mentioned San Lazaro, the color drained from his face. "You've seen it?" he whispered. "I've seen what's left," I answered. He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll take you there, but only once, and if the ground moves, we run." We set off before dawn. The air was wet with mist, the kind that clings to skin and muffles sound. Elias walked ahead, steady and sure. But the field seemed different with him there, as if it had been waiting for both of us. That's when we saw them. Footprints, clear, fresh, pressed into the mud, as though a procession had passed only minutes earlier. Dozens of them, some small like children's, others wide and heavy like men carrying burdens. They trailed across the field toward the heart of where the village should have stood. My pulse raced. "Someone's been here," I said. Elias shook his head. "No one comes here." We followed the trail, step after step, until something impossible happened. The footprints began to fade. One by one, they lightened in the soil, as if the earth was swallowing them back. I crouched, pressing my hand to the ground where a print had been seconds before. Nothing. Smooth, damp earth, unbroken. I looked up at Elias. His face was pale, lips pressed tight. "It doesn't want us to follow," he muttered. But I couldn't stop. The trail of fading prints pulled us deeper, leading us straight to the center of the field. There, the ground seemed softer, darker, as though hiding something beneath. Elias grabbed my arm. "Enough!" We turned back. I opened my mouth to argue, but the earth answered first. A single footprint appeared in the soil before us, not fading this time, forming, deep, sharp, as though an invisible weight had pressed down into the ground. Another followed, then another. Step by step, the prints approached us, though no one was there to make them. Elias whispered a prayer under his breath. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then the bell tolled. 1, 2, 3. The footprints stopped inches from my boots. Episode 7. The bell beneath the ground. The footprints ended at my boots, pressed into the earth as if an invisible presence stood face to face with me. I couldn't breathe. The mist tightened around us, thick and heavy, muffling even Elias's ragged whisper. They're here. But then the sound shifted. The bell. It wasn't distant this time. It wasn't drifting from the air above or echoing through the church. No, this toll came from below, vibrating through the soil, deep and metallic, as though the earth itself had swallowed a cathedral whole. 1 strike, 2, 3. Each note traveled up my legs, through my bones, until my teeth rattled. Elias fell to his knees, palms pressed against the ground as if bracing for it to split open. I dropped beside him, straining to listen. The ringing didn't stop. It continued, relentless, a rhythm like some ancient liturgy. Beneath us, the earth quivered. Then, through the shifting soil I saw it, a frayed rope, black with dirt, coiling upward like a vein. A bell rope. It threaded out of the earth, disappearing back into the darkness below. Without thinking, I reached for it. The fibers scratched my palm, rough and real, proof that I wasn't hallucinating. Don't, Elias hissed, clutching my wrist. His eyes were wide, wild. If you pull it, you call them. But something inside me had already decided. I tugged. The rope shuddered. A hollow boom roared beneath us, louder than thunder, shaking the ground so violently I thought the earth might tear itself apart. The sound was deafening, monstrous, far too large for a single bell. It felt like 1,000 iron throats screaming in unison, and then silence. The mist cleared just enough for me to see. The soil around us shifted, opening in jagged cracks. From those cracks, fragments emerged, rusted nails, shards of wood, scraps of cloth, coffin remains, grave offerings, bones. Dozens of skeletal hands clawed up through the fissures, reaching for the rope, for us, for anything. Elias yanked me back, shouting, his voice shredded with panic. Run! We sprinted across the field, the bell booming again, this time without my pull. The rope lashed behind us like a serpent, thrashing in the dirt. I didn't dare look back, but the sound chased us, strike after strike, each one closer, faster, hungrier. By the time we reached the edge of the field, my lungs were burning, my legs trembling. But I swear, even as we collapsed into the road, the bell followed, not fading, not distant, pounding beneath the ground as if San Lazaro itself was alive and calling us back. Episode 8. The Children's Voices. That night, sleep betrayed me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. The rope twitching in the dirt, the bell pounding from below, those skeletal hands clawing for light. But it wasn't the images that kept me awake. It was the sound. The ringing hadn't stopped. Even in my motel room, miles from the field, the tolls crept into my ears. Not loud, but constant. A heartbeat of iron. By 3 in the morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove back. Elias refused to come, muttering about curses. But my obsession was stronger than his fear. I parked at the edge of the field, headlights cutting through the fog. That's when I heard them. Voices, faint, drifting across the night air. High-pitched, melodic. Children, they were singing. At first, I thought it was a trick of exhaustion. But as I stepped into the grass, the melody sharpened. A hymn. The kind I'd only heard in ancient recordings. Latin phrases stitched together in a tune older than memory. Their voices were thin, brittle, yet carried a sweetness that twisted my stomach. I followed the sound deeper into the field. The fog seemed to glow faintly, as though lit by unseen candles, and then I saw them. Figures, small, white shapes darting between the mist. Children, their outlines hazy, faces hidden. They skipped in a circle, hand in hand, their song echoing as though the earth itself was their choir. I froze. My every instinct screamed to run, but my body refused to move. Instead, I reached for the recorder in my pocket, thumb trembling on the button, the tape whirred to life, capturing their hymn. That was my mistake. The moment the red light blinked, the children stopped, the singing ceased, and in perfect unison, every head turned toward me. I couldn't see their faces clearly, only shadows where eyes should have been, but I felt their gaze pierce through me. Then they began to hum, low and discordant, a sound like a swarm of flies trapped in glass. I hit stop on the recorder, heart pounding, and they vanished. Gone. The field was empty again, silent. Back in my car, I replayed the tape, desperate for proof. But what filled the speakers wasn't singing, it wasn't humming, it was crying. Dozens of children weeping in agony, whispering words I couldn't understand. No, not couldn't, wouldn't. Because as I listened longer, the whispers grew clearer. They were speaking my name. Episode 9, The Village in the Mirror. I should have left after the voices. Any sane man would have. But obsession has its own gravity, and San Lazaro pulled me like a planet no one escapes. The recorder never left my pocket after that night. I replayed it again and again, though each time the children's cries grew sharper, closer, until it felt like they were whispering straight into my ear. But the worst part wasn't the sound. It was the way my reflection began to change while I listened. It started small. The bathroom mirror in my motel room flickered as though the glass itself shivered. My reflection blinked slower than I did, moved half a beat behind. And then one night I saw something over my shoulder. A village. At first it was faint, ghost-like, painted in shadows. Houses, narrow streets, lanterns glowing in windows that shouldn't exist. And in the center, a church, its doors wide open, waiting. San Lazaro, preserved, whole alive. I staggered back, heart hammering, but the village remained in the mirror. The details sharpened, stone walls, the well in the square, even figures drifting through the streets. Men, women, children, all standing unnaturally still, their heads tilted as though listening for something I couldn't hear. And then they moved, not toward each other, toward me. Every figure in that mirrored village turned, their blank eyes fixing on mine. Slowly, they stepped closer, filling the glass until their faces pressed against it. I gasped, spun around, nothing behind me but the dim motel room. When I turned back, the mirror showed only myself again, pale and trembling. I told myself it was exhaustion, a hallucination. But the next day, it happened again, this time in the church ruins, in a cracked mirror hanging crooked on the wall. The same vision, the same village, alive inside the glass. And once again, they turned their gaze on me. Only this time they didn't stop at staring. As I stepped closer, drawn in by terror and fascination, one of them raised a hand, pressed its palm against the inside of the glass. My chest tightened. Against every instinct, I lifted my hand too, fingertips brushing the cold surface. And then I felt it. Pressure from the other side. Something was pushing back. The mirror shivered violently, the glass rippling like water. My hand sank half an inch into its surface before I ripped it away. The village vanished. The mirror cracked from corner to corner, splitting the image in two. But not before I saw them. Hundreds of faces behind the glass, mouths opening all at once, not to scream, to welcome me in. Episode 10, The Forbidden Confession. The mirror's crack haunted me, a scar that refused to heal. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw their faces pressed against the glass, lips moving in silence, waiting for me to cross over. But it wasn't the mirror that led me to the truth. It was the confession. Back in the diocesan archives, tucked behind parish registers and brittle papers, I found a box sealed in wax. Its label had been scraped away, as though someone had tried to erase even the memory of it. My hands shook as I pried it open. Inside lay a thin roll of parchment. The handwriting was unmistakable. Father Mateo's. It wasn't a sermon, it wasn't a prayer, it was a confession. I unrolled it, and the words bled into me like venom. "Forgive me, Lord, for I have sinned." The voice in the confessional is not of this earth. It knows my secrets, my doubts, my shame. It tells me salvation is a lie, that the village is already damned. I resisted, but the voice offered a covenant. It promised protection, prosperity, if I would only let it speak through me. The lines that followed were scrawled, frantic. I agreed. I opened my mouth, and it filled me. And when I spoke the words to my flock, they did not pray to you. They prayed to it. The bells rang on their own that night, not for heaven, but for something beneath us. The ground opened. The village disappeared. This was the price of my confession. I dropped the parchment as if it burned, my skin prickling with cold sweat. The old woman had been right. The priest had spoken with something that was neither man nor God, and he had delivered his entire village into its grasp. The air in the archive grew heavy, pressing down on my lungs. I thought I was alone, until I heard it. A whisper, low, patient, rising from the confessional booth in the corner of the room. It spoke in echoes. The words stretched thin like fabric ready to tear. "Come closer." I froze. My body screamed to flee, but my legs moved on their own, carrying me toward the booth. The door was cracked open, darkness yawning inside. "Say it," the voice urged. "Say what you fear most. Confess." My hand reached for the door, trembling, heart pounding, and for a moment I thought I might give it what it wanted, spill my soul into the void and let it swallow me whole. But then the bell tolled. 1, 2, 3. The whisper cut off. The booth fell silent, and in the quiet I realized something far worse. The voice hadn't been inside the booth at all. It had been inside me. Episode 11. The Return of the Priest. After the forbidden confession, I couldn't trust my own voice anymore. Every word felt stolen, borrowed from something that lived beneath my tongue. I stopped speaking for 2 days, terrified that if I opened my mouth it wouldn't be me who answered. But silence wasn't enough. San Lazaro wanted me back. On the third night, I woke to find the journal of Father Mateo lying open on the motel desk. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even unzipped the bag where I had hidden it. Yet there it was, pages fluttering as though stirred by an invisible hand. And on the open page, new words had appeared, fresh ink. "You are ready to meet me." I slammed the book shut, my breath ragged, but the damage was done. I knew where I had to go. The church. Fog thickened as I returned to the ruins, a suffocating blanket that swallowed even the moonlight. Inside, the air was heavy, rank with the scent of damp stone and rot. The mirror on the wall was whole again, unbroken, gleaming faintly in the dark. And there, standing before the altar, was a figure. A man in tattered vestments, spine bent, shoulders trembling as though under unbearable weight. His back was to me, but I didn't need to see his face to know. "Father Mateo." I took a step forward, the floorboards creaking underfoot. At the sound, he turned. I wished he hadn't. His face was pale, stretched tight over bone, but where his mouth should have been was nothing. Just smooth flesh, seamless, as if silence itself had consumed him. Yet when he spoke, the sound poured from deep within his chest. A hollow toll, a bell struck from the inside. Gong! My ears rang, my knees buckled. He stepped closer, and the sound reverberated with each movement, louder, heavier, until the church walls shook. He raised his hands in a mockery of blessing, fingers warped and cracked like charred wood. His chest heaved, and another toll burst from within him, shattering what little glass remained in the windows. Gong! The ground trembled beneath my feet. The cracks I had seen before spread across the floor, and from them seeped voices, prayers, screams, sobs, all blending together into a single, endless plea. Father Mateo pointed at me, and though he had no mouth, the words filled my head. "Confess, and take my place." The mirror behind him flickered to life, showing the village whole again, its people waiting in silence, their mouths moving in unison. They weren't praying, they were chanting, for me. And as Father Mateo stepped closer, the bell within him ready to strike once more, I realized the truth. He hadn't vanished. He had been waiting. Episode 12, The Last Prayer. The church groaned as though it were alive, each timber bending under the weight of something unseen. Father Mateo loomed before me, a vessel of silence, the bell tolling from deep inside his chest. Every strike rattled my bones, shaking me toward the floor. Gong! My ears bled, my vision swam. But through the haze I saw the cracks widening across the stone floor, and in those cracks were words, scratched, carved, etched as if by desperate hands clawing from below. A prayer. Not one I recognized, not Latin, not any tongue I had ever heard. The letters writhed as I read them, shifting, bleeding into shapes my mind could barely hold. Father Mateo pointed at the floor, his hollow chest swelling, the bell inside him roaring again. His voice, though he had no mouth, filled me like poison. "Speak it. Finish the prayer. Free us." Behind him, the mirror flared to life once more. The village reflected whole and gleaming. The people knelt in rows, their heads bowed, waiting for the final word. Their mouths opened in unison, moving with the rhythm of the prayer carved at my feet. And I understood. San Lazaro had not been erased. It had been suspended, trapped in a prayer left unfinished. A prayer that should never have been spoken. I dropped to my knees, fingers trembling as they traced the lines in the stone. The letters burned beneath my touch, searing into my skin, branding me. The voices in the cracks whispered, begged, pleaded. "Finish it. Say the last word. Release us." My throat tightened, my lips parted. For a moment I felt the word rise inside me, a sound not meant for human breath. If I spoke it, the village would return. If I spoke it, the dead would rise. But at what cost? Father Mateo's shadow fell over me. He knelt, pressing his hand to my shoulder, and the bell in his chest boomed louder than ever. My skull vibrated. My vision went white. "Finish it," he commanded. I screamed. Whether in defiance or surrender, I couldn't tell, and the word tore itself free from my mouth. A word I cannot remember. A word that did not belong in this world. The cracks split wide. Light exploded from the floor, blinding, searing. The church convulsed, the mirror shattered. The village's chant became a single deafening cry, and then silence. I opened my eyes. The church was gone. The field was gone. I was standing in this village of San Lazaro, whole, alive, and every villager stood in perfect stillness, their eyes locked on me, waiting. Episode 13, The Vanishing recorded. San Lazaro stood before me, streets cobbled, windows lit, air alive with the smell of wood smoke and incense. For a heartbeat, I thought I had succeeded. I had brought the village back. But then I noticed the silence. No footsteps, no whispers, no cough of a neighbor behind a door. The villagers stood frozen, filling the square like statues. Their eyes glistened but did not blink. Their lips trembled but did not speak. And all of them were staring at me. I stumbled back, reaching instinctively for the recorder in my pocket, my last weapon, my last witness. I pressed record, the red light flickering in the mist, and I spoke, my voice shaking. "My name is..." But the recorder hissed, crackled, refused to capture my words. I tried again, louder, desperate. "This is proof. The village exists. I'm standing..." The machine cut me off. The tape whined as though choked, then played back in real time. Only it wasn't my voice. It was theirs. Dozens, hundreds, the villagers speaking in unison. "He has confessed. He belongs to us." I dropped the recorder, my stomach twisting. The red light blinked once, twice, then went dark. But the screen still flickered with images I had not filmed. Me, standing in the square, surrounded by villagers closing in. Elias's voice rang in my memory. "If the ground moves, we run." But the ground wasn't moving. I was. The villagers began to step forward in perfect unison, their feet pressing into the cobblestones without a sound. I spun, desperate for escape, and found the church looming behind me, its doors wide open. Inside, something glowed, pale, beckoning. I grabbed the recorder from the ground, clutching it like a lifeline, and ran into the church. The doors slammed shut behind me with the force of 1,000 hands. The glow came from the altar, and on it, lying open, was the recorder itself. But not the one in my hand. Another, identical, playing. I heard my own voice echo back at me, words I had never spoken. I gave them my prayer. I gave them my name. And now I vanish with them. The church quaked, the bell roared from the depths, and the recorder in my hand disintegrated into ash. I screamed, lunging at the altar recorder, but the villagers' voices rose outside, chanting, until the walls themselves dissolved into fog. And then, nothing. Only the tape remained. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in San Lazaro. I was staring at a screen, my story playing back as if it were a recording I had never made. Only there was no sound of my voice. Just silence. Just vanishing. Episode 14, The Village Returns. When I woke, I was no longer in San Lazaro. I was back in my motel room, the hum of the fluorescent light above, the cheap wallpaper peeling at the edges. For a moment, I believed I had dreamed it all. The church, the mirror, the villagers' chant. Then I looked out the window. San Lazaro was there. Not the ruins, not the empty field. The village itself, whole, alive, rising out of the earth as though it had always belonged. Cobblestone streets stretched beneath flickering lanterns. The bell tower stood proud, casting its shadow across the parking lot. My motel now sat at the very edge of the village like a foreign object welded into its body. And the people, they moved this time. They laughed, they walked, they carried baskets of bread, drew water from the well. Life pulsed through the streets. But something in their rhythm was wrong. Every laugh ended on the same note. Every step landed in the same beat. An entire village breathing in unison. I grabbed my bag and stumbled outside. The journal of Father Mateo clutched in my hand. The air was thick with incense and wood smoke, choking me with familiarity that wasn't mine. Children darted past, their eyes too dark, too deep. One of them stopped, looked up at me, and whispered, "We remember you." My blood ran cold. I backed away, nearly tripping over the curb. That's when I saw Elias across the street, pale, trembling, his clothes soaked with sweat. "You see it too?" I called. He nodded, eyes wide with terror. "No one else does, just us." And then the bells began. Gong. Every villager froze, heads lifted, eyes rolled upward as though strings had been pulled from heaven itself. The sound shivered through my spine. The journal slipped from my grasp, falling open on the pavement. A gust of wind flipped the pages until it landed on a final entry I hadn't read. "When the village returns, it will not stay in one place. It will hunger for more. It will spread. And the next name it erases will be yours." I staggered back, the words searing into me. The villagers lowered their heads in unison, every pair of eyes fixing on me and Elias. Their smiles widened, perfect and identical. The bell tolled again. Gong. The streets shuddered, cobblestones crawling outward, expanding. San Lazaro wasn't staying still. The village was growing, brick by brick, road by road, swallowing the motel, the parking lot, the highway beyond. Elias grabbed my arm. His voice cracked with fear. "If it keeps spreading, there won't be a world left." And as the bell rang a third time, louder than thunder, I understood. San Lazaro hadn't vanished. It had been waiting to return. Episode 15, The Price of Witnessing. The village spread like a stain across the earth. Roads unspooled where highways had been. Houses rose where fields should stretch. The air thickened with smoke and hymns. San Lazaro was no longer content to hide. It was devouring the world. Elias and I ran, but every step carried us deeper into its streets. No matter which turn we took, we ended where we began, the church square. The bell tower loomed above, its mouth yawning, ready to swallow. The villagers circled us, silent, smiling with identical lips. My breath caught as I saw them part, making way for a single figure. Father Mateo. His mouthless face glowed pale in the torchlight, his chest trembling with the weight of the bell inside. Gong. The sound nearly knocked me to my knees. Elias clutched his head, screaming, his voice drowned by the toll. Mateo raised his hand, pointing not at him, but at me. The villagers followed, every finger outstretched, a forest of accusation. "Witness." The voice filled my skull. "You have seen. You cannot leave." I shook my head, choking on terror. "I'm not one of you. I never was." The ground cracked beneath us, light bursting from the fissures. Words writhed in the soil, the same unfinished prayer I had spoken in the church. Only now it was complete, written with my voice, my confession. The recorder I thought had turned to ash appeared in my hand once more, the red light blinking. It switched on by itself. My voice echoed out of it, calm and final. I gave them my name. I gave them my world. "No!" I hurled it to the ground, but the villagers' chant rose to meet it, hundreds of voices weaving into one. Elias fell silent beside me, his body dissolving into mist, his scream cut short. And then I understood. This wasn't about the villagers, not about Father Mateo. It was about me. San Lazaro hadn't chosen me to save it. It had chosen me to replace him. The bell tolled again. Gong. The villagers' mouths opened, and for the first time I heard their true voices, not in Latin, not in prayer, but in my own language. Welcome home. The light consumed me, the world split apart, and when the silence fell, there was no motel, no highway, no outside world. Only San Lazaro, whole and eternal. The village had returned, and I was its priest.
Epilogue, The Witnesses. They say stories are harmless. Just words. Just echoes of things that once were. But San Lazaro was never just a story. It was a prayer carved into the earth, waiting for someone foolish enough to finish it. That someone was me. And now, the village stands eternal. Bell tower gleaming. Streets alive with those who vanished. They kneel before me, their mouths open in perfect silence, waiting for the next confession. But here is the truth that chills me more than the bell's toll. I was never meant to carry this alone. The moment you listened, the moment you heard, you became part of it. San Lazaro feeds on witnesses. It spreads not through roads and walls, but through memory, through stories passed from one mouth to another. So when the bells toll tonight, listen carefully. 1, 2, 3. If you hear them, even faintly, you will know what I know. The village has already found you, and it is waiting.